Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Kent City Council special meeting workshop this afternoon. Today is Tuesday, September 28th, 2021. And prior to this, we had a special council meeting where the mayor presented her mid-biennium budget adjustment. And this will give us the first opportunity to look through our booklet, to start gathering our thoughts and our questions, and having one of many discussions that we will have throughout this process. So I just want to thank the mayor for presenting that to us earlier today. This is an opportunity for us to not make any big changes or add any new programs, but look at some of these things that have happened throughout the past year and where some of those extra funds can be spent or where we have to make adjustments because of other things that have happened. So, and as the mayor mentioned earlier, there are some things that we have talked about in conversation and suggestions through this past at least year and a half, and we will see some of those reflected in this as well. So again, thank you everyone. And I would like to introduce Paula Painter, our finance director, to go ahead and start us through this process. So welcome, Paula.
Great. Thank you very much, Council President Troutner, members of City Council, Mayor Ralph. I'm excited to be here today. We do have a lot of things to go over as if you heard the mayor's presentation. For those of you watching, there is a lot going on in this budget adjustment that from an operating perspective is pretty status quo, but with the capital funding and the ARPA funding, the American Rescue Act plan funding, it gets a little bit more involved. So we do have plenty to talk about tonight. Here's our agenda. We're going to go over some of the citywide adjustments, looking at the citywide revenues and expenditures. Then we're going to focus on the general fund. General fund tends to be a big focus of many of our conversations. And then we're going to talk about also some things that were approved in 2021 that will carry over into 2022. We're going to talk about baseline adjustments. And then finally, the meat of this conversation is what got approved through this budget process for operating, capital, and ARPA. And then we'll wrap up with some timeline and then start gathering some questions. But before I actually get into the meat of all of this, I kind of want to take you guys back in time 2 years when I stood in front of you for my first time giving a mid-biennium budget adjustment presentation as the finance director here for the city of Kent. All of you were here except for Councilmember Michelle. I don't believe you were there. You may have been in the audience. But during that time, we did a little exercise. I had brought a quarter, and I believe I handed it to Councilmember Larmer. And asked her to then pass it to the council member sitting next to her, and we'll just assume that's Councilmember Boyce. And if you recall during that conversation, every time we passed that quarter to the next person or transferred it out to another person or another fund, it grew. What was 25 cents when Councilmember Larmer had it was 50 cents by the time Councilmember Boyce received it, and it'd be 75 cents by the time Councilmember Ralph had it. So we're talking about how this kind of impacts our budgets. We receive money in one fund, and as we have to move it to the fund that's going to spend it, it doubles that budget. So you're going to look and you're going to see some big numbers up on the screen. Remember, we have big numbers with ARPA. There's nearly $20 million that is budgeted in 2022 related to ARPA. I can tell you now that's at least double counted because we have to receive it into a fund that our auditors can audit and then transfer it out to where we're going to spend it. And sometimes it does require 2 transfers, so there are some occasions where it is counted 3 times. So please be mindful of that. You've seen that a lot on these quarterly budget adjustments that come through where we talk about this double counting. So I just wanted to bring that up because the first slide you're going to see will probably be a pretty big number. So let's get started. So overall, this adjustment is for $71.8 million. What I can say is just related to the ARPA funding, there is about $25 million that is double counted. Because actually between double and triple counted. So you can kind of reduce that. Then with our capital funding, you're going to find another $5 million that is double counted, so you reduce it. So we really don't have $71 million to spend. But this is how we have to record our budget in order to spend it appropriately and account for it correctly. You're going to find that we have an increase in the general fund of $17.67 million. Our special revenue funds of $31.18 million. Sorry, I'm going to round up. This is crazy. Capital projects at $13 million. Enterprise funds at $1 million. Internal service funds at $4.7 million. There's a slight adjustment in our debt service funds, and what that is, it's related to our cost allocation. So as those adjust, they hit every fund. And then finally, there's this category called other funds. I do want to take a minute to talk about this because this is new. We haven't really had this before. There is an accounting standard that came out that changed how we have to account for our impact fees. Impact fees were never required before to have a budget. Now with the new accounting standard, they are required to have a budget. We need to, in our reporting, show a budget to actual report. So these were not budgeted in the 2022 budget, but now they are here. Looking at the total revenues for 2022, you can see in each of the funds, taxes and big categories of taxes, licenses and permits, intergovernmental services, charges for services, fines and forfeitures, miscellaneous, and transfers in. Overall, the proposed budget has $408 million in revenues, and of that, about 126.7 of that is within the general fund.
How many pages are they in the book here?
Oh, yes, they are. There you go, page 5. So if you, and on both revenues and expenditures are on the page 5.
I'll talk about the first 2 where you show. So they're not the first 2 pages missing? First 2 slides.
So the information that Paula is discussing is in the budget book. The slides themselves are not, but we can post the slides online on our budget website in the morning.
Yes. All right, so hopefully we got everyone where we need to be. The expenditures, $420.3 million in expenditures for 2022, with $128.4 million of that being the general fund. And you can see $76 million in special revenue, debt service at $8 million, and so forth. All right, so what really went into the baseline? We did adopt a baseline, and this is what you just were seeing is slightly different than what you adopted originally. That's the result of some changes in some of our estimates for revenues, sales tax, garbage tax, and interest income. And with the sales tax, there is an increase of $1.6 million, and that $1.6 million is split between the general fund and the criminal justice fund. It's 80% general fund, 20% criminal justice. And what that is doing is bringing us more in line with what our current trends are, but yet still being conservative in our approach to doing so. There is an increase in the garbage tax as well, and that increase is for $217,000, and again bringing that in alignment with our current trends. And the this will be impacting general fund, street fund, youth teen fund. Interest income. Interest rates right now are significantly down, and although we've received in extra money with ARPA, we've received in the streamlined sales tax dollars, we're still not able to make up that difference in how much those interest rates have declined. So in this budget adjustment is a reduction of interest income for approximately $1.3 million, and that is spread over 30 different funds. When we start looking over at the expenditure side of the house, we're going to see increases in wages of $3.8 million, and this is the result of changes to bargaining agreements, increases in COLAs. When you have a CPI of 6.3, that is a huge impact on the salary side of our expenditure budget. Benefits, actually, we're going to see a decrease for the retirement, particularly in the realm of the public employees retirement system, so PERS. They had a significant reduction in the employer contribution rate. LEF did also have a reduction in their rates, but it was not as significant as it was for PERS. The central cost allocation, so the central cost allocation is finance, HR, law, administration. All of our costs get allocated out to the various funds. And what we do is in each budget cycle for the first year and second year, we budget. The first year we know what the actuals need to be. The second year we have to estimate. So for 2022, we actually adjust it to match our 2020 expenses. By doing so, we reduce the expense within the general fund and actually transferred out those costs to other funds in order to align with our actual costs. There were also adjustments in the utility clearing, public works, engineering allocations, as well as property and liability insurance allocations. And I know we've been talking to you guys about both of those insurance funds for some time now, so I think that you're aware of those ones. Within the budget, there were some things, some larger things that you've approved through quarterly budget adjustments, one of which was the utility tax. And so we've had to adjust 2022 to account for that. If you recall, utility taxes were directly receipted into the IT fund, and because of accounting rules, we had to actually modify that and receipt it first into the general fund and then transfer it out into the IT fund. It did not impact IT fund because they had revenue, but it did create an expenditure, an expenditure within the general fund. They'll receive the revenue and then transfer it out. We had originally budgeted the affordable housing sales tax in the general fund. That has been moved now to other funds. And that is also budgeted in its new appropriate fund, as well as the House Bill 1590 housing sales tax. That also is getting budgeted this time around 60% of it is going to be being used for its designated purpose, and then the other 40% is going to be used to help fund the co-responder model as well as some other things. And then in addition, there's an accounting change where we have created a new street utility clearing account. So there's an account where we'll be allocating out of that clearing account to the street, solid waste, and residential contract projects. So it does end up being really a net zero to a fund and a transfer out to those others, but it does require a budget adjustment. So if we're looking now, we've made it now to our general fund. This is what we tend to talk a lot about. Originally, we had adopted $111.2 million for revenues. We are going to be seeing increases with this budget. And so you can see the green piece of the pie, that's transfers in. Really, that is made up of those dollars being transferred in from ARPA in order for us to transfer out. When we get to the next slide, you'll see a transfer out of the general fund for some of those dollars that are ARPA related. You will also see increases in taxes for $3.1 million, and then a category of other. And so, of course, you're going to see the reduction of interest income. You'll see an adjustment to the sewer franchise fee, liquor excise tax, fire plan review, and just some other things. And really, this is putting things in alignment with what our trends are looking like right now. All right, the expenditure budget. The expenditure budget was adopted at $110.7 million. Again, you see ARPA requests. Some of those will be transfers out. Some of them will be spent within the general fund. Also, you'll see adjustments for salaries and benefits, and then this category called Other for $2.7 million, and that's made up of additional operating expenses, which we'll be going over those. Previously approved expenditures, we talked about that just a moment ago. A medical rate decrease. If you guys do recall, with the 2021-22 budget, we did for 2022 put in a 5% increase for medical. We did not need to utilize that, so we are actually backing that 5% out of that, and that's what you're seeing there. And then also the cost adjustment, the central cost allocation adjustment, reducing $500,000 from the general fund. All right, so this is probably the section that you guys have been waiting to get to. So what's included in this budget that wasn't part of the original budget, that just really wasn't something you've seen before or an adjustment to baseline? Operating additions, the co-responder model, bringing together both medical professionals and law enforcement at $942,000. That will be utilizing that House Bill 1590 revenues. We'll be unfreezing the 5 officer positions. Originally, those positions were funded out of the general fund, but we will be funding them out of the criminal justice fund to reduce the impact on the general fund. Also, this business systems analyst. The business system analyst is that data collection person who would also be helping with managing the telestaff schedules for the police department. For economic and community development, they would restore a permit tech position as a TLT at $126,000. They'll restore the building inspector position at $141,000. They currently have an engineer 2 position that is a TLT, and it is currently vacant. That will be transitioned to a permanent engineer 4 position. It won't be adding an FTE because they already have it. Impacts to 2022, since the TLT was budgeted, would be $45,450. And then finally, a comprehensive and some area plan updates at $125,000. With Public Works, the mayor was talking about earlier in her presentation the litter strike team that would be made up of 2 maintenance workers, as well as have dollars available to contract services to help with cleanup within Kent. And then finally, to convert a TLT position they have to a permanent engineer 3 position. What you're going to find here is, yes, there are dollars that are associated with this, but it's taking a position that's sitting in drainage right now, moving that position to streets, and then funding it out of streets. So we wouldn't be adding an extra position.
What's the process? Are we allowed to ask question, clarification, or we wait till she finishes?
Yep. I'm always happy to take questions.
Well, I just
I'm
wanna show-
sorry, I probably should have stopped and.
I just want to stay in the process, that's all.
Opportunity, yes.
So for the litter strike team, do that include a graffiti, or would that be something total addition to that, or what? When we talk about litter and cleanup, I kind of see that as part of that.
We haven't completely
Okay.
fleshed this out, so absolutely, that's part of what our public works teams are doing now on like public-facing bridges and that kinds of thing. So yes, on public-facing buildings, that's already part of the role of our public works department.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. On that business system analyst, how much of the time right now, we don't have that position? Oh, the chief is not here. You may know, though. So we don't have that position, but who is the person who is doing the ComStat stuff right now? How much time is that? I'm trying to figure out how much time is going to be spent doing that versus the data collection analyst position.
Sure. So right now, we're not doing the race and equity data analysis, so we don't have a good handle on that. We are having to do the telestaff schedules, and right now, one of our commanders and our support services manager are doing that, and collectively, that's somewhere between 20 and 50% of their time. So if I had to ballpark it today, I would say it's probably 60% equity data and 40% telestaff scheduling.
Thank you.
And the Chief Padilla feels confident that we can do the equity data analysis with that, with those available hours.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Kaur.
Thank you. Just a quick question about, we're moving 5 positions to criminal justice fund. How many positions do we have open currently? Do we have that information, or should I wait for Chief Padilla?
Paula, do you have that? And we've got quite a few offers out currently, so I don't know where that puts us.
Okay, so I don't have the exact number, but what I can tell you, it's 13-ish.
And then reducing that by at least a handful with offers that have been put out. So I think that it could be a third to a half less than that.
Okay, and then we're sort of hoping that we'll be able to fill these 5 positions as well in the next year.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay, let's moving on. For parks, it would restore a senior center coordinator position. It would be at a TLT. That's one of those positions that were lost during the budget reductions, as well as $50,000 for the lifeguard program, and signage and striping for Lake Meridian in order to help during their busy time. And as the capital projects manager, which is a TLT position, as we start getting into the capital projects and the ARPA projects, you're going to see there's going to be a long list that will be impacting some facilities that will really need to have capital projects managers to help oversee those in order to ensure that we could be able to get those done on the timelines that we're looking to do that. Information technology would be restoring their training budget at $33,680. We would be adding an FTE for desk side support. That position will be funded from professional services, so contractor budgets will be reduced in order to have a permanent person on board. In addition, we'll be adding $50,000 for software maintenance, and then JDE, JDE is our finance system that we use, and to be able to have the contractor support that system, there would be an additional $332,000 for that. And then finally, for human services, there's $40,000 allocated for temporary staffing.
Councilmember Larmer, followed by Councilmember Fincher, Boyce, then Michaud. We'll just go down the line.
So question on the desk side support. What does that look like? Are we getting rid of are those contractors right now at the IT help desk upstairs, or?
We have one permanent position, and this would be creating a second permanent position and eliminating the need for a bulk of that contractor
Okay.
support. So making it into an actual position.
So taking it down from like 3 people to 2? I'm just,
Yes.
I guess I just want to make sure the service level is
That is absolutely, so there will be some contractor dollars that will remain available as we figure out what that looks like. But yes, it creates a second full-time permanent position, and then knowing that depending on projects, like as we replace equipment or things like that, as that comes through, then there would be a need to contract for some of those services.
okay, thank you.
Councilmember Fincher?
Thank you. What was budgeted before we cut it out? What was budgeted for the lifeguard program this year?
50,000?
We didn't cut out lifeguards,
No.
Well, we didn't have lifeguards up at Lake Meridian.
but it wasn't cut from the budget.
Right, it wasn't cut. So what was the budgeted amount there? Okay.
So this is just taking it up to 150?
I think it's taking it from 50 up to
Up to
100,000 because
Oh, gotcha, okay.
before we had the challenges with hiring, the plan was only to staff it at certain times of the week. And so this is to restore it to the original concept at 100,000, assuming that we're able to hire staff next summer.
Okay.
Councilmember Boyce?
Just to follow up on the lifeguard, I talked to Josh Sutton from the YMCA, and he had a pretty good program, where we talk about maybe outsourcing may not be the right word, but, they have lifeguards there and that actually train the school. I don't know what else came out of that, but that's something we looked at, maybe just taking that, and since they already have the resource and they was willing to allocate and make sure they fulfill our need. Did we look into that at all? There any outcome from that?
You're correct, Councilmember Boyce. We're in our second meeting with the YMCA now. We are exploring a potential 100% contracted opportunity for them. If that doesn't work out, we're going to go for them to be able to fund a training program for lifeguards, that if we hire someone that the YMCA would then train and get them certified for us. And the third one is just keeping it the way it is, and how will we do it? So we're actually exploring all three, and we're hoping to have kind of an answer in place by year end. So we're on the same track.
Good, and because I was talking, it was only for Kent, they were looking at other cities too, which I think if you combine that resource, it could be a good thing, so.
Yep, so stay tuned.
My other question for you too, so I'm just curious, with the senior center coordinator, I know we had a pitch to us about the diversity and how we diversify the senior citizen. Is that part of that, or would that be something totally different that, as a role as we look for doing that?
I think part of the requirements for the King County levy is to reach more diverse seniors, and so we will be doing some of that. Some of the larger scale stuff would need additional staffing, the stuff that you recently heard from the consultant.
Okay.
But the original plan of the levy is going to be worked on with this position.
Good. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Michaud?
Okay, my question is about the lifeguard. Well, my first question about the lifeguards. Okay, so this extra $50,000, is that to pay them more, or is this for the training program?
Well, we don't officially know yet. I have funding that I did not use at roles. And so I have that. This adds to it. So it depends what deal I can potentially work out with the Y, but I'm working on that. If it just kind of depends on that. If not, then I would have to look at hours and how much in what hours and days could I actually do the lifeguard program for the full week's program. So right now it's I'm still working on the concept. It just depends which one of my 3 options I can pull through. And I'd be happy to present later when I have a little bit more at Parks Committee so that everybody's aware of kind of what our plan is. But right now I'm in the middle of working on it, so I'm not fully ready. But the plan is to be able to fund it at the full level.
Okay.
Whether I can or not, I still have to work that through.
Okay, and then this human services temporary staff at $40,000, what is that?
That's actually human resources. That's not HR.
Oh, sorry, just
HR.
kidding.
Yeah,
Just kidding. I was wondering why it wasn't very much. Okay. Okay, so then the senior center, we lost FTEs, right, in the last budget. Was it just one or was it more than one?
I know we lost several on the
Okay.
last one.
And so this person does what up here?
This one
senior
is going to
center
actually work on actual programs.
Okay.
So senior programs.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just want to reiterate, I mean, I know, and I know you're going to do a phenomenal job, but I think the lifeguard really was something that was really passionate about this whole council here. So, and I know we had some issues for us with the COVID and making sure we get enough people, but I will hope, that, if COVID is gone, that we will be able to fulfill, a lifeguard requirement so the lake will be open. So I don't know whether or not that's enough money, but I will hope when time comes, I will hope we wouldn't have to say we don't have enough money, right? So we will trust you that, there's enough money in that bucket to be able to fulfill that.
Yep, that's the goal. The mayor and I are on the same page. We're going to try and make it happen. I just got to work through final details and then see. So, and hopefully the workforce will be out there because we're still a little bit behind on staffing for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, any other questions on this slide?
Don't pick on HR, it's only 40,000, okay?
All right, so now we get to the capital part of this discussion. We have $5.5 million in capital additions that are included in the proposed budget. The Kent Commons renovations for the HVAC and the gym wall curtain at $715,000. The City Hall improvements at $705,000. Software stabilization. So this would be Telestaff, Amanda, security stabilization, Laserfish, Tiburon, Laserfish, Tiburon's not at that point yet, would all be included in what you're seeing there for software stabilization. Also funding for some very large anticipated projects with Tiburon and JDE, our financial system, at $500,000 each. An internal service consultant, so what that is this is a request that we in finance brought through, asking for a consultant to help us with budgeting in a way that is lends to help be transparent in how it is being budgeted. Our internal service funds are really difficult to be able to clearly articulate those funds and how they're being used and what they're paying for. And I think that in the end, if we can get a consultant in to help us establish some best practices in this, that would be able to help us to have a much more meaningful discussion related particularly to our internal service internal service funds. So that would be for $250,000. Enhancements with Workday for $366,000, card access upgrades at $330,000, the removal of the training room vault. So I think that last year, some of you did a tour of the training room, and you may recall that there is a vault that is there, and that vault really needs to come out. That would cost about $100,000 to remove that from that facility. And then finally, Signature Point Park design at $250,000. And then just real quick, those are the ones being funded out of the Capital Resources Fund, totaling $4.7 million. But then we have a couple other funds. We have $805,000 being budgeted within this budget. If you recall, not that long ago, Tim Higgins from Showware came and provided you with his capital plan for Showware. Included in that was $686,000 for 2022 for items within his plan. And then finally, the Criminal Justice Fund had put money aside for the law office remodel, and this would finish off what it is that they need for that at $119,500. And I'd be happy to take any questions on this slide.
Oh, yeah, Madam President.
Go ahead.
Are we lighting up? I'm sorry. Okay, let me light up. I'll wait my turn.
All right, Councilmember Larmer, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce.
I thought it was a free fall. Sorry.
So question on the vault removal, because I remember that was part of the budget ask, and this might be a question for Mike. This is a question. Is this in addition to that previous budgeted renovation over there?
It is.
Okay,
It is.
so this is like an additional cost above what we had planned?
Correct. There was an original budget as a part of the biennium that was at $200,000. That was before Julie and the facilities group had hired their superintendent. Now that Will has been on board, he's been great to work with. We've been taking tours of the facility, going through planning. There's an architectural plan that's going to be the next step in the collaboration process. But the vault has been a bit of the gorilla in the room, trying to determine whether or not it is affordable to be able to haul it out of there, or at a minimum repurpose it with ventilation, et cetera, in order to make it potentially into a conference room. So that's kind of where the planning's at right now. We do know that there's an additional ask either way that we have to factor in order to be able to effectively deal with the vault.
Okay, great, thank you. Just want to clarify that.
Councilmember Boyce.
Mike, also, my same question to the vault. Try to put it on eBay. I can't imagine nobody not wanting to buy that. If that's a possibility, put it out there, see if it.
We've actually, again, Will's been and his team have been great to work with. There's really been some out-of-the-box thinking. There's actually been some discussion about how down the road, for a while there, folks were driving by, would look like a very similar scenario that we're going through with that building. As you might imagine, the devil's always in the details with those things. The kinds of conversations we've been having have revolved around the weight of that, what path through the city you would take. There's the potential for damaging railroad tracks, for instance, if it's taken over that section of the city. So we've gotten into a bit of a bear of a scenario of trying to figure out what to do with that vault. I think to date, the most promising prospect is spending those dollars to renovate that space so we can get the proper ventilation and cooling and heating associated with it, making sure, as the council had underscored with me and is near and dear to my heart, along with the mayor, to make sure that it's a safe workplace for our employees. So it's turned into a mini project in and of itself to figure out how best to deal with the vault.
Okay, and my other question, I'm a big fan of Workday, so I know it's been up and running. It seems to be going pretty well. What enhancement you can be doing on Workday? There's,
typically what will happen with big deployments like the Workday or HCMA, Human Capital Management automation project that also included telestaff scheduling for PD. There's quite a bit of stuff that you end up having on your features list that you kind of punt to after go live, in order to make sure that you can try and hit that go live with a system that can be used and then enhanced and patched with security patches along the way. There was a list of approximately, I kind of defer to Terry, our HR director, too, to correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a list of well over 100 items when we went live at the end of last year. The team's been doing a great job of hammering through those. We've got to approximately half that number, I believe, is where we were. But again, there are constant enhancements that are being asked for in order to improve the functionality of system, and that's what that constitutes.
And we're still using the 80-20 rule. You kind of scared me when you say enhancements. I'm assuming that are these new additional, what do I want to say, capability features of the
New
system,
features and functionality is primarily what it is.
not customization.
Correct. It's a highly configurable system,
Right.
but it was actually a fundamental strategy to make sure we didn't get mired in completely customizable systems. So those configurations are an ongoing effort to improve the platform.
Great, good, thank you.
All right, any other questions on capital? Okay, so now we're going to move on to ARPA. So ARPA, there was a framework that was established and approved by council that set human services and equity, economic developments, infrastructure, and revenue loss as the 4 categories in which we would be spending these funds. And what you will find is that in many of these areas, we still have capacity left to budget, where we purposely did not budget the full amount because, as we know, what is needed by our community may change over time as we navigate COVID. We have found COVID has made us look at things differently multiple times through this journey, and so it just does provide for some level of flexibility there as we look to the future. With human services and equity, $4.5 million was allocated, and what you will find is that of that $4.5 million, $1.75 would be set aside for the Building Resiliency Fund. There will be a race and equity coordinator. This is going to be a 3-year term limited position for $412,000. An equity and inclusion speaker series, that would allot for $50,000 a year for 3 years for a total of $150,000. The translation of city documents, translating to the 5 most spoken languages in Kent, that at $150,000. The community navigator for $400,000. A human services planner, which is a 5-year TLT for the Parks Department at $768,000. That position will be able to help support the work necessary for managing that Building Resiliency Fund, as well as other ARPA-related projects that come forth, and the data collection setup. So the position itself was funded under operating, but being able to tap into the ARPA funds in order to help with that data collection platform.
Paula, I've got a couple questions. Councilmember Kaur?
Thank you. What does Building Resiliency Fund looks like? What does that entail?
Well, the Building Resiliency Fund is going to be a human services fund in which how that fund really ends up looking will be a collaborative effort amongst the mayor's office, the city council, and human services to determine what that really would look like. So it would be providing funding for a variety of functions, and I don't know if somebody else wants to jump in on that. Thank you.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it. So think of the CDBG CV money that we had 2 rounds of investment. So that's out of the CDBG, which is a much more restrictive program. This is like the Human Services Fund's cousin of that, where we'll work with the Human Services Division, Human Services Commission, Mayor's Office, and Council to come up with a plan to invest those in nonprofit organizations in our community.
Okay, so this would be where our small businesses and our nonprofits would benefit the most from this funding.
Yes, but I do want to point out that this is different from the small business loan program or the Navigator program, which comes out of the economic development bucket of ARPA.
And that human services planner is part of this, as you just mentioned, Paula. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the things that Derek just touched on, and I probably should have spoke to this a little bit earlier, what you're going to find is we did our best to put things in these so-called buckets of that framework. But the reality is there's a lot of these things that overlap one another. You're going to see things in various areas that could have fallen under equity that you might see, and human services that you might see in economic development or in infrastructure. So there is overlap with all of these requests. We just tried to keep it simple and put it in the one that seemed to fit maybe the best, if that's the right term to use.
Councilmember Boyce.
Councilmember
Oh.
Boyce got a follow-up.
Did you have a follow-up, Councilmember Corr?
I have another question, but I can come back. Thank you.
Okay.
This is more of a comment. I wanted to say, when I see this here, I mean, every line item have been brought up by one of the council members, so it's pretty clear that you guys were listening. I mean, I think these things is important to the community, important to the council members, so I just want to say kudos. I think this is really a lot of meaty, good projects that I think some of these we had talked about for quite some time, so I just want to say thank you, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Councilmember Boyce. It was a lot of work on the part of all of our departments, Derek and myself, to make sure that we were meeting the needs and the expressed priorities for the council. That's that collaboration part, right? It matters where we start in this conversation, how we get to an end, and how we do it in a way that it satisfies everybody and the community at the same time. So definite, very purposeful, and there was definite intent there, so thank you for that.
Good job, really, really hit right at home, so thank you.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. So what you were saying about the overlap, it could be overlap, but would it be here or IT or communications if I was looking for dollars that were going to be for translation, for captioning of our meetings, for sign for other languages? We had talked about that also.
So this is the
Along with
beginning of that investment in translation. I don't know that we're specifically starting with the most used documents as the starting place. We're still in those conversations. The company that we had started talking to, there's some issues with that as far as the closed captioning, but this is specific to translation as we move forward in the documents.
Thank you.
Councilmember Corr.
Thank you. So my other question was about the data collection. Wasn't that funded out of a different fund initially?
With this budget, for the 2022 budget, is that what you're asking of, or you're asking was it funded earlier?
Yeah, for the 2022 budget.
Yeah, with this budget amendment, there is part of it that is funded out of the operating fund, and I believe it's the general fund. Yes, the general fund. Thank you, Michelle. It's funded, the position itself is funded out of the general fund because it is an ongoing cost, so we need to be able to maintain that. But the data collection setup, all the things that we need to really get this program going, this could be paid for out of the ARPA fundings. It's one-time monies that are used towards equity.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Any other questions? All right. And just to let you know, in this category of human services and equity, there is still additional dollars yet to be budgeted. And when we get to that point, we will come back to you to do those. But at this point, we're waiting to see what kind of happens with the community and their needs. The additions related to economic development. The flex plan or the flex funding, I know you guys have heard a lot about that, those grants to small businesses at the $2.75 million. We're anticipating actually that would be coming through in 2021, so you wouldn't necessarily see it within your budget document. We do want to, once we can kind of iron out some things, bring that forward to you this year. The business technical assistance would be funded at $225,000. The support childcare expansion That's at $600,000. The Support Business Accelerator Network for $400,000. Project Feast at $160,000. STEM Education Partners at $650,000. Washington Space Consortium at $450,000. The Meet Me on Meeker, again, some funding at $500,000 to be able to make us competitive for the grants that may arise for that. And then Willis Street and Naden intersection improvements, the right in, right out at $2.8 million. And so those are the items that we have left. There is still in this bucket a little bit left that we have not yet budgeted that we would be able to come forth in the future to be able to do that as well. Any questions on this slide?
Councilmember Larmer, followed by Boyce.
Thank you. So the Washington State Consortium, remind me again, was that apprenticeships, partnerships as well, or?
I'm going to invite Bill Ellis up here to speak to these. He's going to have a lot more information.
Sure. Councilmember Larmer, did you say the Washington Space Consortium or the Washington, you said Washington State Consortium?
Washington Space.
Yeah, that's, if you recall, we had a presentation from Dean Taiyan Cheng from Green River College, and she talked about her partnership with the University of Washington, specifically with Robert Wingley, who passed in December of 2020. That program has been inherited now by Christy Morganson from University of Washington. She's also the chair of the Aeronautics and Astronautics program. This would be for Kent school teachers in the summer, cohorts of 5 at a time, to go and learn rocketry and CubeSat.
That's that 10-week
and then
program.
bring that back into the school district over time. We would have a partner, we believe, with NASA on that, and NASA's been funding that at a steady pace for years and is expected to continue to have funding to University of Washington. So this would enable local partnership with the college and with our school kids through this investment.
Super, thank you for that.
Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam President. I know you said earlier these things that fit in different buckets, but child care expansion, why would that not be in human service versus ECDC?
Economic development money to help establish, so this is the overlap, exactly. Economic development money to help establish new daycares, work with remodeling, update, rental assistance. So we plugged it in over here, but yeah.
And remember, it is economic and
I know. I just
So it is.
trying to wrap my head around it.
But that's part of that overlap is really, it's supporting small business because it's supporting those daycares, also human services because it's helping people get childcare so they can go back to work.
And this is a new bucket money. We've had expansion. I think we didn't do this before. This is something new, right?
This is a new program.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
And I think if I'm looking in the book, that other piece of the partnership comes from that Building Resiliency Fund.
That's a
The
possibility.
childcare
Yep.
piece.
And then
Let me add on that just briefly. There's help for childcare on the demand side is one way of thinking of it, and then there's demand on the supply side. So it's helping childcare as businesses, not necessarily helping people get childcare, but helping people who run childcares as business owners expand and grow.
Okay,
This would be on the supply side and not on the demand side.
that's clear. Thank you for clearing that up for me. And one follow-up question for Paula. So we have the different buckets. Like this is ECDC, we saw human service. So did we allocate money for each one of those buckets and they're going to use this amount, but even though ECDC, they may have additional fund they're not using yet, or we just saying these are the buckets and we got this other fund over here, and then when you want more, you go dip into it.
So I'm trying to find the page here because there's a page 59. The bottom of page 59, it shows what's remaining in each bucket.
Okay.
And we're oversubscribed in the infrastructure budget. We have flexibility in the other ones.
Okay.
But remember, these were our own creation.
Right.
There's nothing in ARPA that says that the council can't exceed in one area and underspend in another just based on your priorities.
Okay.
And we have multiple years to spend this. So the idea is and we're not even getting
Yeah.
the rest of the funding until a later year. So making sure that we've got some flexibility built in as things evolve and change and we work our way through the pandemic.
So for example, like EC, I know this is what we kind of allocated, right? If something huge come up that is a big thing, we can easily go back, well, Kirk and his team can easily go back and present this and try to Okay.
Yeah, the buckets are 100% were voted on by council through that committee, through the ad hoc committee, and then through council approval. So that's the framework that we then built the request under, but there's nothing that's, and that, again, also part of why we're not spending it all the first day, because we don't know what the emergent needs are going to be and want to have some flexibility in that funding.
All right, any other questions under economic development? All right, so for infrastructure, Panther Lake Community Park for $1 million. This is an area that definitely has been underserved in the park arena. Military and Veterans Drive placemaking, setting aside that $1 million for that. Council office move and technology upgrades at $280,000. Customer service counter improvements. This is that economic and community development, customer service and facilities project for over at the Centennial Center for just over $1 million. Print shop successor projects at $302,000. A security engineer, this would be a 3-year TLT position in IT for $570,000. A 3-year TLT for a GIS analyst for $467,000. And a teleconferencing room hardware. Now this is improving our technology so we could be able to hold meetings that are both virtual and in person, so a hybrid sort of a meeting. We plan on coming forward with this in 2021 as well, since this is a need that is in front of us at this moment. We've been dealing with this for quite some time now. What kind of questions do you have on this slide?
I guess I'll just go. The GIS analyst, was that a previously frozen? Or I guess my question is, how many do we have on staff now? Was that?
And I'm going to invite IT Director Mike Carrington up to answer that question.
Thank you, Paula. The Enterprise GIS Group was a division of the Public Works Department, which was solely focused just over a year ago on providing services exclusively for Public Works. As a part of organizational development, working real closely with Derek and the mayor especially, we agreed to take that group because of all of the cloud-based systems that are being rolled out and the need for focus on GIS, which typically would be a feature bolted onto a system, but now with the new cloud-based systems, it's really at the heart of most, if not all of them. The need for GIS services across the entire organization was recognized. Got support from the mayor's office to pull 2 employees from that group into the IT department. As you might imagine, what went from basically requests that were focused almost exclusively on Public Works to now every department in the city, especially from a data and analytics perspective, kind of hitting that group up to help support their GIS needs. We actually had doubled in initial cuts, tripled the request amount, but we're able to secure this as what was going to be brought forward as a request to council.
Okay, great. So it's basically an addition because of the growth in the demand.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions on this slide? Okay, moving on to the revenue loss element of that framework. Included in the budget is $2.25 million for fleet vehicle replacements. There is a backlog of replacement for city vehicles that need to happen, and using some of that revenue loss to get us caught up with some of that is included in this budget. One of the things that's not necessarily in the budget, but it is being earmarked, is $150,000 to look at those, to help out where we have taken losses in our lodging tax revenue, you know, with people not traveling like they were for quite some time. That fund has taken a significant hit, and being able to use those funds to be able to handle some of the events that may have been funded by the lodging tax revenue. The other part of this is going to be, the rest of the $10 million will be kind of a larger look at our city funds. So we're going to be doing a full analysis in finances. What funds are really struggling? We know for sure we have issues on some of our insurance funds, both liability and property, and some of our other funds have been hit with some revenue loss. So we're going to be doing a full analysis as to really where those dollars can go, and be bringing that back to you in the future. But there was so much going on in this budget, it really became difficult to roll this into that discussion as well. Any questions on the revenue loss aspect?
Councilmember Boyce.
Thank you, Madam President. How did we come up with $150,000 for LTAT? Where did that figure come from?
That figure,
You look at the loss that was come out of that.
yeah,
And if I look at, you know, just the return on investment on some of the investment that we have made over the years, it began to pay off, where you got different conventions coming to the city now. So, and I just think it's still gonna take a little while to try to probably get that fund back at where it needs to be. So just curious, how do we come up with that amount?
the 150,000, I believe that number was based on some of the what we had projected to receive versus what we actually received in some of those funds for those years. We do know that we're still not up to par, so we haven't even completely captured the full loss that fund is going to take in the end. And these numbers were put together a little while ago, so they still may not even be completely accurate. It was an earmark. That number may change through the analysis as well. We just wanted to make sure that we had it on our radar. And again, we'll be looking at that more thoroughly as we do that citywide analysis.
And this is before we adopt this here, or this is after?
No, it'll be after we adopt it. That it's not part of this discussion. And in fact, Councilmember Boyce, that lodging tax reimbursement is not in the budget. That's why we're saying that it's, it doesn't say up there it's earmarked. That's why I keep referring to it as being earmarked.
Not in the budget at all?
Not yet. It is part. It's going to be part of the piece that comes through. The 2.25 is in there. The 150, I'm sorry, it was supposed to say earmarked there. I do apologize. Is we know that that's a fund we have to look at, and that's an interest of several people that we do look at, making sure that we address that. And I wanted to make sure it didn't, that you guys knew it didn't fall off our radar of something that was important.
It is off the radar. It's not in here, right? So I hear what you're saying. I just think, in my opinion, that's something we might want to revisit during this process here.
So, and this is, so, yes, as we do an analysis of where the loss is, this is really just the very public recognition that that is part of that analysis that we're doing. So there will be money that goes, as we do the analysis of those losses, we know that, wanted to make sure that you knew that it had not fallen off the radar. And as we do that analysis, that's a part of those losses.
So we adopted this year, so it's not part of this year, right? So the analysis, when will that happen? So there will be some that come later that we will add to?
So that's part of this 7.3 that shows as being remaining as we do the analysis of revenue loss. Then those pieces, that 7.3 will continue to get allocated.
And I'm just trying to understand.
No.
So yes, I'm passionate about lodging tax, and that's okay. But we already know what the losses is for this year. I mean, Kurt can tell you today what the loss is. So I don't know.
We want to make sure that we're addressing the loss going forward as well, to your point.
Yeah. We're trying to make it a big comprehensive review for all the funds, so we can bring forth a great big portfolio for you. With the fleet replacement, the reason why we specifically put that in the budget at this point in time is because it's not really a revenue loss that I can show you. It's that we are behind because we haven't been able to fund it over the years at the level that we have needed to fund that. And so it seemed like an appropriate use, which is why we included that in this discussion instead of the big discussion on the remaining parts. All right.
Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you. So I'm reading the report here. So there's 175 assets. I'm assuming it's 175 vehicles that are eligible for replacement based on the criteria. Do we know what the makeup of those are? And where I'm going with this is I'm wondering, you know, obviously big equipment is not probably going to be eligible for perhaps electric vehicle, but I'd be really curious how many of these we could potentially pursue electric vehicles for city use.
Okay, I'll turn this over to the Public Works Director, Chad Buren.
Thanks for that. Yeah, we are looking at electric vehicle options, but these are vehicles that are within the operating fleet. So yeah, they're not big trucks. They're mostly small-sized trucks.
Okay.
Which there are some options for electric trucks, but not as widely ranging as passenger cars.
Okay.
So mostly service trucks.
Okay, but we are looking at what options there could be there? Okay, yes. Thank you.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. I would like to hear more, and I'm asking the question out loud because I think Councilmember, well, at least some of the other council members would be interested. I had a question about, are we looking at hybrid or electric vehicles for some of those that are being replaced? And I was told that yes, because there's a state law, so I wanted to hear about that law.
I'm not familiar with the state law you're talking about, but I do know that the fleet has been looking into all options with regard to electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, clean diesel, everything that's on the table.
Yeah, I don't remember the details off the top of my head, but for a number of years ago, the state legislature adopted a policy of moving government fleets toward at least hybrid, and I can't remember the extent to which it's electric as well, but you know, hybrid is definitely something that we need to look at, and we'll do so.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Okay, so this gets us now to timeline. Mid-Biennium budget adjustment, you're going to find that our timeline's pretty short. We have a workshop on October 5th. We have a workshop on the 19th. We're really wanting to get this budget approved before the Thanksgiving holidays so everyone can enjoy their holidays. And to do that, we would have to bring it forth to the Operations and Public Safety Committee meeting on November 2nd in order to then have it passed on the 16th of November. I know that from this point, it's going to be the matter of us being diligent to being able to respond to your questions. You know, this really has been supposed to be from the operating side, a status quo budget. We aren't going to have specific department presentations for you, but it will be really important that we get questions from you that you have so we can respond to them. I ask that you send all your questions through to me. We'll get them logged. We'll keep a log of them and respond to them. I know we have our next workshop just next week, so we'd like to be able to get our responses to you as early as we can because, again, the timeline is a little bit short on this. Do you have any questions about our next steps, about the timeline, or any other questions about the budget?
Thank you, Madam President. So in the past, I've given the council a little cheat sheet. And so as you go through the budget document, here are the pages that I think are the most important for your review. So pages 28 to 31. That's 28 to 31 summarize the general fund changes. 34 to 37 are the other fund changes. 53 to 59 are the ARPA investments, and then 96 to 98 are the capital investments. So obviously there's a lot of information here, but if I were to focus my review, I would focus on those pages. And then as Paula mentioned, please pass along your questions, and we'll keep a log and add those to the log and use that as our touchstone at each of the upcoming workshops. Due to the compressed time, I think high-level outcome questions will work best, but this is your budget, and so if you have detailed questions that are just that you really want the answer to, of course, please let us know, and we'll be sure to get that information to you. And then tomorrow morning, we'll be putting this budget book online as well as the slides, so you'll be able to take a look at it there in an electronic format, and residents will be able to take a look and be prepared to comment at one of our upcoming public hearings. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Derek. Councilmember Boyce.
This time I seem to be shorter than previous, if I'm not mistaken. Are we making a lot of assumption that we're able to get through this pretty quick? I recall us meeting a little more regular to get through this here, so.
Yeah, so I think so this is a mid-biennium budget adjustment, not a full-blown budget process. But where it's odd is this year we have about $5 million in capital to allocate, as well as 20 to 28 million in ARPA. So that makes it a little bit more complex than a full-blown budget process, or than a mid-biennium budget process, but less complex than a full-blown budget process. So one of the reasons why it's shorter is we're not going to have department presentations like we do for a full-blown budget process, but directors will be available and they'll help to answer questions that you submit and we put onto the log. So we think if we can get your questions in advance, that we'll be able to get through this in the 2 remaining workshops in the operations and public safety meeting. We always have the option to add more time, but our goal is to try to make it fit.
That's fair. I just want to make sure we can get it done in a timely manner, so I'm okay.
All right, any other questions or comments? Paula, thank you. Just remember, everyone, get your questions to Paula. So you have homework before you. So take some time, please, to make sure you look through your booklet and get those questions to staff so that they can get working on it as soon as possible. And with that, that brings us to the end of our workshop. Thank you, everyone. We will see you next time. We are adjourned.